so much. Uh, it's good to be with you guys. I always like to start off my little chats that I used to have with you guys with a song. So I found some appropriate music, and I thought I'd share it with you. Hopefully you can hear it. Here we go. Okay, there you go. That was the musical humor intro. Uh, that was the Police for some of you younger folks that are like, what was that? Anyway, they had a song called Don't Stand So Close to Me, which I think is appropriate nowadays. So, uh, I have no idea what you guys are going through in Europe uh, or Australia. I can give you a report on what's going on here in the States. I always like to start off calls with bad news, because that's just the way you go. But our country has kind of lost its mind a little bit, and if it hadn't before, and there are pockets and there are places where very few people have been affected, like here in Tennessee. There are very few, and some of the experts who are saying that millions will die, I don't trust their models as much as others. But anyway, I'm not sitting in a bunker with a shotgun, just like, come on, bring on the government. I'm not doing that. So life is good, but life is different. And today I thought I really sat down for a couple hours yesterday and just kind of put thoughts together. So I don't know if I have a perfectly organized outline, but we'll jump in. And it's great to see your faces. I miss you guys, and it's just good to see. I look for when Dimitri dropped me a note and said, "Hey, could you be a guest on our call?" I was like, "Yeah, that's cool." So I waived my normal $5,000 fee per hour and decided to go ahead and and join you. So today we're going to talk a little bit about perspective. And I had read, I'll give you short stories today, but I'd read a story about a 24-year-old young man who, like you guys, who was riding a train with his father, and just had come back from the hospital. He was looking out the train window, and he was disturbing passengers. He yelled, "Dad, look at the trees going behind." And you think, well, that's not exactly even good English, but that doesn't make sense. And the father sort of smiled, and there were couples on the train sitting there. This was pre-virus. He looked at the 24-year-old's childish behavior with a little pity. And then they heard the young man yell out again, "Dad, look, the clouds are running with us." And people are kind of like scratching their heads and going, "Oh, wow, this guy's going to be a problem on the trip." And one of the couples nearby couldn't resist and just said to the father, "Why don't you can take your son to the doctor. That might be recommended." And the father smiled and said, "I did, and we're just coming from the hospital. My son was blind from birth, and he just got his eyes today, just got his eyesight." And so I thought that's kind of a new perspective for everyone that was riding the train with that young man shouting weird stuff. So I think one thing to think about, I know that you guys are adapting heavily to what's occurred worldwide, but I wanted to remind you that good things can happen even during financial downturns. Okay, so if you've spent any time, I'm sure Dimitri, I'm sure Jason have shared some maybe some uplifting material about what can still happen in the business, how you can still grow, how you can still be productive. But I actually found 10 on LinkedIn, 10 successful companies who started during the last, what we call here in the States, the Great Recession in 2008. And I don't know if anybody if you were in my class, I would send you into a breakout room and you could discuss this and try to come up with some of the companies. But let me just share those with you so you don't have to think. One, in 2007, Dropbox was started. You probably heard of that. WordStream was happening right around the time of the Great Recession, 2008, massive financial downturn. Zendesk got up and running. Groupon, some of you, anybody used Groupon? My wife is excited about that. That started in 2008. Cloudera started 2008. WhatsApp came in at the end of that, which is a lot of us use. If anybody's taken an Uber, that started in 2009 while the downturn was still happening. Venmo, which I use, even me, an old guy, will Venmo money. Don't ask me for any, but that started in 2009. Slack was up in 2009. Square, you do your little credit card with vendors. Square in 2009. Instagram was in 2010. And Pinterest, which some of you may be on at this very moment, that was started in 2010. So that all happened when things weren't working and when most people said, you know, the economy's shot, you can't sell, you can't do anything. Anyway, big business turndown did not affect, it affected companies, but these folks decided they were going to make things happen, not just watch things happen. So a lot of people were not in a growth mentality, and those people were. So let me just tell you this, that today and going forward, whoever gets perspective quickly will win, okay? So you have to do what in the NLP world, what they call reframing. So let me ask you a question. How do you get unstuck when you are stuck mentally? Okay, think of a time you were stuck or you were anxious or you were stressed. How did you get out of that mentally? All right, when I've asked audiences that, I usually have somebody, you know, give the wrong answer, which is, I get drunk. Okay, that is not a good answer. Typically, that will not solve all your problems. It will for a while, you'll feel great, but getting wasted, probably not a good answer to getting unstuck. A lot of people say, well, I stepped back, I took a look at myself, I looked at my situation, and then I realized, okay, my problems are not world ending. And had another guy say, well, here's how I reframe. I imagine being in a balloon 1,000 meters in the air. My problems looking down seem very small. So mentally, you can reframe. What would your problems look like if you're like, well, 1,000 meters wouldn't do it? Well, look at your problems from 5,000 meters, you know? I look at, you know, I've got people that I know who've called me in the last couple of weeks when the employment numbers came out yesterday here in the States, and 10 million people have lost their jobs. I'm here to encourage you. 10 million people have lost their jobs here in the States in 2 weeks. 10 million. Now, if you're in sales, get excited because you're not one of those people. But a lot of folks are hurting here and they're panicky. And so, you know, I'm not a panicky person, but you know, that kind of gives me pause. And you know what? How I get perspective sometimes is I look at what other people are having to deal with, and it puts my life in perspective. I just saw on Facebook yesterday an old friend of mine from work, from back in the day, just discovered his young daughter who's in grade school. He posted a post that said, you know, pray for my daughter, Penny. She has leukemia. We just found this out in the midst of all this. And I thought, you know what? My problems are small. You know, I'm going to be okay. I'm with a guy, I go to church with a guy named Leonard Mayala. Leonard is this great guy. He's from the Republic of Congo. And he doesn't speak English very well. He speaks French well, not English. But he has figured out how to drive to church. We used to give him a ride every week. And when he was young, he's probably almost 40. But when he was younger, he had polio. And so he wears the braces on his arms and on his legs rather, and then he takes crutches and gets to church. And has the best attitude. And his wife back in the Congo, just this week, we helped raise money to move her from the village she was in because there were militants who were attacking people and killing her neighbors. And so we moved her to a city where she could perhaps start a business and helped him fund that. Well, do I have problems compared to Leonard? No, you know. And I remember when I was selling many, many years ago, I remember having a horrible day. And I shared this story before, but you guys don't remember it. But I was having the worst day and a bad week. My head was fully inserted in a dark place. I was like, why am I doing this? This is ridiculous. I'm not making any money, blah, et cetera, et cetera. And I went to a prospect's home and knocked on the door. And a kid came to the door who literally, the door opened and I thought, well, no one's here. And then I looked down and there was a kid who was about 10 years old in a wheelchair who was so happy. He's like, how are you? What do you want? You know, and I'm like, oh, okay. I was like, okay, God, thank you. I get the message. I have no problems compared to him. So I'm just worried about what I'm going to sell. He hasn't even walked before. So I'm not sharing stories to help you feel pity or anything. I just want you to know that one great way to get perspective is just compare your situation and to be thankful. I know we did a lot of phone calls on being grateful, on being thankful for what you have. Have any of you actually written out still? Are you still doing your gratitude journals? Good job, Gitas. You know, if you're taking time to write down what you're thankful for, you know, what would be great is by the end of this call, just write down one thing you're thankful for. And then maybe, and put it somewhere where you can see it on your desk. And then the next day, add one more thing you're grateful for. And then the next day, add one more grateful thing. And then you'll end up with a list. And if you review that before work, or you add something at the end of the day, guess what? It's really hard to be bitter and cynical and jaded if you're noticing, if your brain is scanning and noticing all the things that you're grateful for. So let me encourage you just to do, that's an easy exercise, but keep that in front of you. Otherwise you can get really off track mentally. So I'm sure you guys may have talked about tips or strategies on how to have a healthy quarantine period. Have you guys talked about that at all? Tips on how to do well during the quarantine, not selling necessarily, but just being healthy. Yeah, no. Okay, good. Staring faces. Well, let me just share a few things, because if I just kind of wax on about perspective, people are like, well, I didn't get anything out of that call. All right, fine. Let me just give you 6 or 7 or 8 strategies really fast that you can do to be healthy emotionally and physically during the quarantine period. In fact, I'll give you one tip that I heard from a physician I trust yesterday who had been working in the thick of things in New York City, where they are having massive problems, and they've had about 40% of all the US deaths have occurred in and around New York City, and he worked in the busiest hospital. This is not a tip, but I'll just tell you. He said the biggest way that this virus is being transferred is from our hands to our eyes, mouth, and nose. So he says, obviously, everybody's washing their hands. That's a smart thing. But if you go to the store to get food and you've touched a shopping cart, you know, when you're done, make sure you don't at one point touch your eyes and hand. You need to wash them and not touch those areas. Because he says this is when it happens, because they've studied thousands and thousands of patients. And when people wipe their eyes or blow their nose, that is when all this gets in here. So that's a tip. And why is it that Taiwan and Japan have had so few cases? Because everybody is wearing a mask. They do it all the time anyway. You see them in airports. Very, that does the job. We haven't gotten to that here in the States, so we're just like, whatever. All right, so here are my tips. Number one, if you're locked down, as many people are here, number one, stick to a routine. I'm sure you're doing that. Stick to a routine. Go to sleep. Wake up at a reasonable time. Write out a schedule that is varied. It obviously includes LGFG work time, but includes time for you to take care of yourself. So that's first. Second, and I got this from something online. Dress for the social life you want, not the social life you have. So get showered, get dressed, you guys all look great. You're in some comfortable clothes, wash your face, brush your teeth. Some people aren't doing that anymore. Take time to, have a good shower, put on some bright colors. As you know, it's amazing how our dress can impact our mood. Right, ladies? Right, okay. That's kind of sexist, I don't know. All right, number 3. Get out at least once a day. If you're allowed to go outside, our states and municipalities are slowly closing the country permanently, but get outside once a day for 30 minutes. And if there's there's tons of people. My neighborhood is full of people walking now. So do it first thing in the morning or later on at night when it's less traveled. If you can't get outside or you're kind of pent up in a flat, open the windows, blast the fan. Fresh air will help your attitude. So get out and get some air if possible. All right, 4. Find time to move each day. When I hang up, and I do it for 30 minutes, when I hang up, I'm going to get on a bicycle. Since they've closed my swimming pool, because there's so much infection that can happen inside a pool. Not true. I'm going to ride a bike for an hour out through the parks at a reasonable rate of speed. All right. So that's going to be my workout. If you can't get out and work out, then YouTube videos, if you haven't seen them, they're all over the place with free movement classes. My daughters are doing online workouts and yoga. It's beautiful. All right. 5, reach out to other people at least once a day for 30 minutes. What I'm doing this weekend with my family? There are, I don't know how many of us, 20 of us getting online and having a massive family Zoom call. So yeah, talk to people that you love. Do FaceTime, Skype, whatever. Phone calls, connect with people and provide support, because you guys are nice and stable and pretty mature, but there are other people who are kind of freaking out, and they need to hear from people who are got their heads screwed on correctly. And if you've got children, you need to do that for kids too. So here's a big one. Put a star by this. I got a few more real quick. Turn off the news. Turn off the frickin' news. The 24-hour news cycle is probably one of the worst things that have happened to our country, at least. I would limit all my conversations about COVID-19, especially around kids, because kids see and hear everything, right, Dimitri? So yeah, and they're even here to confirm that. So turn off the news, because you don't really learn. I know the unknown is something you want to blot out of your life, but the fact is, you don't learn a whole lot just staring at the news. Nothing typically happens from moment to moment. All right, here's another big one I like. Help someone else. Help someone else. In March, just about 3 or 4 weeks ago, I had a chance to go help some tornado victims up in Nashville. You probably didn't hear about the big tornado problem, but we had some tornadoes go through Nashville, and they hit north end of the city and then went 50 miles east and just plowed it. And so it was very helpful for me just to go help someone else. We all tend to just think of ourselves. So, get out there. There's a guy I eat with today where I'm having lunch with an 80-year-old guy in my little group I see, and he is, because it's smart, he is homebound, you know. So I'm going to go bring him lunch, and we're going to sit outside at least 6 feet apart, and we're going to have lunch together. So that's so much healthier emotionally than just sitting there thinking. All right. So here's my last thought before I can do other things if you want, or if we have time. Find the lesson in all this. Find the lesson. What's the construction that can come out of destruction? In other words, what am I learning? What am I learning? And what do I need to change? I mean, I think God has sort of impacted the world in a big way. And so you need to adapt. So what do I need to change? We'll talk about God here in a minute. So here's your affirmation. If you're like, oh, I need some affirmations. Remember this one's old. I don't know where this started. Probably somewhere in India. This too shall pass. Okay? This too shall pass is so, you guys have heard this. Good. If things are going great, guess what? This too shall pass. Calm down. Don't get hyper excited. If things are nasty, if you're having a tough time, guess what? This too shall pass. Keep perspective. That's our theme for the day. All right. So let me, I've got a story here, but I don't think I have time to hit that. So I have some, let me just share a couple of parting thoughts, because I know you guys have got to work. Yeah. Be productive, or you've had to during the day. That's great. So as I said, I think, you know, to get philosophical, sort of, God's sort of trying to get our attention a little bit here. So he's you know, sometimes he gets our attention by this. And if some of you are, and you're like, well, I don't really believe in God, I'm like, well, that's fine. Let me just talk for 2 minutes, and you can unplug. But I think sometimes God, you know, doesn't, he does it lightly. He'll just tap us. He'll do this, tap, tap, tap. Psst, over here, tap, tap, tap. And we go, what? And we don't pay attention. Sometimes he just goes, you know, and just like whacks us up the side of the head. And so he didn't create a world where we could just make him unnecessary, but I think we've tried to. So I've always, you know, whenever I'm talking to people about life and reality, I just tell people that ever since the beginning, man has tried to make himself God, and we are not, which is comforting to me. And I sometimes have to remind myself, God's God, I'm not, because I will, my normal tendency is to ignore him, put him at arm's length, or tell him, which was the worst when I was younger and more, you know, full of myself, full of hubris. Go look it up. Hubris. I would tell God, I got this, you know, yeah, I believe in, yeah, but I got that. I don't need you. So I don't have this. I am not in control. Okay. That's just a fact. So my tendency is to put my faith in anything but a higher power. And that doesn't work. We're spiritual creatures. We're made to run on him like cars were made to run on gasoline. Okay? There's other stuff you can put in your car and it will start. I can fill my car today with rubbing alcohol for fuel, and the car will start and it will chug along, and then it will not run anymore, because a car was not meant to run on rubbing alcohol. Okay, that's one example. I believe, were designed to run with a relationship with God. That's just a fact. So here in the States, we've been completely obsessed and so proud of our strong economy. You know, we're like, we've got the best economy ever in the history of our nation, blah, you know, chest thumping. And I'm all for that. I'm happy for that we had a strong economy. But that completely evaporated in 1 month. 1 month completely zapped our economy. So my point is, we're not in control. That control is an illusion. You can control what you think about. You can control what you do with your time, but for the most part, control is a big time illusion. So let me just share with you, a few helpful verses that I borrowed. People have asked me. I talked to a good friend I've worked with for 30 years. 30 years I worked with him. I hired him years ago. He called me. We had a Zoom chat. And he said, you know what? I always was a little put off by all your God talk back in the day. And he was kind of a, new age sort of, hey, let's get some crystals and go sit on the beach and become spiritually renewed by watching waves, which is fine, but just a little bit more out there. I love nature and all that. I love waves, but I was like, dude, this will not answer your questions or solve your problems. But anyway, so he and I went round and round politely. So here's some, now he called me and he's like, hey, I'm open-minded. What can you tell me? So anyways, here's a few verses that really helped me when I was anxious, and they still do. First, and then I'll give you this, if you can send me a note or go on Facebook and ask me if you want these. But 1 Peter 5:7 says this: cast all your cares on him, that's God, because he cares for you. Now that is a relief to me. Take all your cares, dump them on him because he cares for you. Here's another. In fact, you know what? I'm just going to read you some, and then I'm going to shut up. And then I'll probably not get to do a call like this ever again. But let me see here. I'm going to just find something that I read yesterday that I thought was so good. Here it goes. All right. So in the Bible, there's a description. It describes a great exchange of our burdens for peace. So in Matthew 11, Jesus says this. You've probably heard of him. He says, come to me, everyone who labors and are heavy laden, like burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I'm gentle and I'm lowly in heart, and you'll find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy, my burden is light. So you have a God who loves you so much that he offers to take your burdens off your shoulders and put them on his. So where does your life feel heavy? Where do you feel buried under the burdens of what you're dealing with? God offers peace, which I think is cool. If you feel alone, if you feel like peace is not obtainable, God's plan is different than the world's plan. The world, our nation, most of the people around me, their deal is, it says you can only have peace when you have completed the job, become the best, et cetera, gained approval from other folks. But God tells you to stop working in your own strength. All right? Food for thought. So we serve, I'll use the word serve. We serve a God who doesn't want you to live even one day under a burden. Every day you can wake up and you can choose to, in a sense, yoke yourself to God and let him take the burden off, or you can just keep all that on your own shoulders. So, I don't know. If God tells me my yoke is easy, my burden is light, then I listen. I'm like, that's cool. I would like that. So you find rest for your souls. I like that. So anyway, those are some thoughts. God is he is available 24/7 to meet with you, to have a conference with you. So I would encourage you to, if you have burdens or fears or stress or anxiety over any of this stuff, our fragile frame as people wasn't meant to bear all this pressure. So I would, talk to him because he's listening. It's true. So anyway, I do have one other useful thought for you, and then I'm really going to be quiet. Let me pull it up here. Yeah. This is it. People are, sorry, it's still early here. I'm kind of like, what? People ask why. They ask lots of why questions right now. Why is this happening? Why is it why? What? You know, the best question probably shouldn't be why, but what next? What next? That is a good question. If you're worried about why this is happening to you, you're just going to get crappy answers. If you're asking yourself, what's next for me? That will be a useful question, you know? I think that would be a question I would ponder. All right, so what can you read or listen to? I have some suggestions. If you have apps that you want, if any of this stuff I have said is useful to you, certainly there's crap on Google you can find, but I have a few things that I go to. If you want to connect with me online, and some of you are like, I don't even have a Bible, I don't even know what that's about. Well, there's a one online called YouVersion, which I've recommended to a few of you when we were in conference. YouVersion, one word, it's electronic. There's another app called pray.com. If you're like, I don't even know how to meditate, pray.com is good. One I listen to every day for 2 whole minutes is a one you can download called Abide. Abide. It's good stuff. And then I don't know who to send this to, but I got this from my daughter. At her work, she works for the Council of International Affairs, which really sounds cool. And so she sent me a few links that her team is sending her to download, like, you know, virusanxiety.com, care package for uncertain times. So I have links to important articles and sites you can go to keep the faith and keep working. Okay? All right. So I will be quiet. Do you have any questions since I'm married to a doctor that knows everything? Sorry, this is disjointed, but whatever. I don't care. I mean, I like you guys.
Actually, I do have a question.
Jason, so, President.
This is a virus question for your wife, and we've got less than a minute. My father-in-law is at a assisted living center, and 2 people have the virus there. Should I pull them out?
Well, it depends on the care.
All right, let's keep that on the next call between you guys privately. I love you guys. When God made Zoom Info, Lee, he only gave us amount of time for free, and then he requests our paid subscription, which is against my religion, as you know. So I love you guys very much. I'll say this. I said this on the Canadian call yesterday, so I'm sorry to the Canadians. Lee, we love you. I'm sure that some people needed to hear that. You know, when the corporate sponsors, Canadians, I'm sorry again, when the corporate sponsors came and asked us to, you know, sponsor Lee for this call, I said, no, we have integrity in this organization. We do not sell out, okay? Because Lee is an original like Alpro roasted almond milk with 100% real almonds, great for your vitamin needs, and available in boxes of 12 at discount right now across superstores in every nation. Guys, I love you. Have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow. Lee, thank you, sir.
You're a champion. Carry on.